attendance marked here. Let's see. I guess it's not on the agenda, but I did send out those minutes that Paul graciously typed up last time. Is there any additions or corrections you guys want to make to those minutes?
I had a suggestion. I appreciate you doing that, Paul. The only thing I would personally like to have us add is the roll call of who was in the meeting, who was absent from the meeting, you know, that type of thing. I'd just like to see that on each minute. Just as they're going to be publicly potentially available, I'd like to have that on there. And like what time we called order and what time we adjourn, maybe.
Okay, that is fair. And that will bring us, I guess, to our next item on here. I guess anybody else have any thoughts on minutes?
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those minutes will stand as drafted, and then we'll go on to electing our officers. I will say, I just kind of want a little bit of a kind of description here for some of these. Obviously, the chair will run the meetings. I think staff, I'm going to still retain, you know, putting the bulk of the agenda together, but whoever you guys decide to elect as chair, I will go ahead and work with that person, you know, to add additional things to the agenda, you know, as we move forward. So the chair, and any of you really, but I'll work with the chair to put those agendas together moving forward. Vice chair will just run the meetings, you know, in the absence of the chair. And then I would like for the secretary treasurer to take the lead in drafting minutes. Those can be sent to me after, you know, whoever wants to do that, send those to me and I can, you know, double check, proofread, and then get those sent out with our agendas for the following meeting. So those can be reviewed at the same time. So with that said, do we have any nominations for chairs for the chair?
I was going to throw out, I would be interested in, I was wondering if maybe if we split the secretary treasurer, but if we don't, that's fine. I'm an accountant, so taking care of the treasury stuff would not be an issue for me. This is maybe picky. I don't want to write minutes. It looks like Paul's good at it, so I'd give him that. I would recommend him for the secretary, and if he's treasurer, I'll help him with that. And I wouldn't mind being the chair or vice chair, but I guess everybody just speaks for themselves. I don't know everybody's specialties.
I was going to nominate Laura for chair.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a nomination and a second. Do we have any other nominations?
I nominate Paul for secretary and treasurer.
And we can, I do want to make clear, if you guys want to split that out into different duties, that's fine. We may not really need the treasurer part of that if we decide not to take, you know, take those fees. So that may not be an issue, or we can keep it all as one. So you guys can make that decision at this time. But okay, so we have a nomination for Paul for secretary. Do we have a second for that? I better miss it.
Jordan, do you want to do them one at a time if you want to follow quote unquote Robert's rules of order?
Yeah,
and
probably easiest.
And it'll take them off of your plate too, because once the chair is elected, then they can run the meeting.
They can run the meeting. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. Yeah, let's go ahead and call the roll on chair. Member Callahan.
Paul, you're muted, and so are you, Karen.
There you go. I have no objections to being secretary, if that was your question.
Sorry, we're taking a vote on Laura as chair.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Member Finke?
Yes.
Member Graves?
Yes.
Member Kiger?
Yes.
Member Luganbiel?
Yes.
Member Stout?
Yes.
And Laura, I assume.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Laura, you are now chairman. If you would like to run the rest of the meeting, or if you would like me to finish out selections, I can do that too.
I feel comfortable if everyone else does. Okay, so let's take nominations from the floor for vice chair, please. I would like to nominate John.
Karen, are you done? Yeah.
I would also nominate Crystal or Karen.
Yeah.
John, would you be interested in the position? You would accept the nomination, if John? Crystal, would you accept the nomination? Would you like to be considered for that position?
Sure.
Karen? Karen, would you like to be
Well,
considered
it
for that
looks
position?
like you have Crystal. I'm not sure about John. Did I?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying someone else. No, I'm sorry. I would be accepted either way, so it doesn't matter to me.
Okay, so we have two candidates. I think that's sufficient.
Okay, very good. And so let's go ahead and I don't want anybody to not have something or want something they want to have because this is pretty straightforward, but since we have two on the agenda, I guess we could take the roll and see how it goes. Jordan, will you call the roll for us, please?
I concede to John.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So
All
we have,
right.
we have a motion on the floor then to accept John as the vice chair. So if Jordan, can you call the roll for me or would you like me to?
I'll
No, I can
second
do
I'll second the nomination for John.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, Jordan, please call the roll.
All right. Callahan,
Yes.
Dominic.
Yes.
Finke,
Yes.
Graves,
Yes.
Kiger.
Yes.
Oh, wait, this is your nomination. Sorry about that. Luganville,
Yes.
Stout. Yes. All right.
Did that finish the roll? I'm sorry, there's a little interference
Yeah.
there.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Congratulations,
All right.
John.
Very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
and we have Paul, motion for Paul, who is interested in the secretary treasurer position. Would anyone second that motion?
A second.
Any further discussion or anyone else interested in that position?
No, what's Paul's last name?
Callahan.
No.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, Jordan, could you call the roll again, please?
Dominic.
Is that Dominic?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Finke,
Yes.
Graves, Kiger,
Yes.
Luganville.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion passes. Congratulations, Paul. Appreciate your help and appreciate you doing those minutes already for us.
Thank you.
We're getting some feedback. I don't know if we know where it's coming from, but someone knows and let me know if it's me and I can mute if I need to. Otherwise, I guess we should move on to item number 3 on the agenda, response to board questions. Jordan, would you like to just kind of walk us through basically these, if everyone has had a chance to read through them, just give us a little heads up on each of them?
Yeah.
We can talk, we can have discussion after each one if there's any comments or questions.
Yeah, just to be clear, these are responses to Paul's questions that I sent out earlier, and I just wanted to go over some of these. Maybe they'll be clarifying, maybe it'll prompt some additional questions. So let's see, the first one.
Jordan, if I may add, I just tell at the committee what I was doing. I read the initial plan and then through one time, and then I went back with a little bit more of a critical eye and had a few questions. I wasn't wanting to argue or debate or try to change anything. I just was wanting more clarification and understanding from my part. as we were going forward. So that was kind of my motive, or rationale behind the questions. And I thought the responses that came back were very helpful. So that just gives you the background of why I asked the questions after the meeting.
I think that's great. I think that we should all do that as we're in the early stages of doing this. And I don't know that any of us has done, other than Mr. Scannell worked on the 353 before, so I think we will have questions. And I think it's great that probably maybe what we should do in the future would be to actually submit them to Jordan, all of us, but Paul would keep a list of them for the future meeting. I just want to make sure we don't discuss anything offline where we have a quorum, because we are subject to the open meetings, sunshine law stuff. So, but we appreciate the questions, and I think we're all going to have them. So I think we should keep that process up at this point. Did anyone, has everyone had a chance to read them? If there's any particular one of the 7 that anyone would like to talk about, or if everyone feels comfortable with all of them, we don't necessarily need to go line by line. Any discussion on that?
I have a different question about the, I guess it was question 4, where the owner deeds the property over to the corporation, then back to the owner. I wasn't quite clear on if that was answered.
Yeah, so based on state law, it does talk about the property owner deeding the property to the 353, initiate tax abate, and then that deed, according to state law, is turned back over to the property owner. Jackson County has actually streamlined that process, so there really is no deed transfer. Basically, what staff at the city does is fill out some paperwork that is recorded for the property that initiates the tax abatement program. So Paul's question was kind of referring to some language in there that deals with what state law says, but here locally it's a little more simplified process. So there really is no deed transfer, but there is documentation recorded with the county.
Thank you.
Yeah. Flora, I can't hear you. I don't know if anybody else can.
No.
She's
Sorry,
off.
I muted thinking I might be contributing to the interference. I'm sorry, number 6, I initially had this question as well, where we refer to market value. And I know I had sent out the email about where you can go to find your land versus your own house property, improvement value. And when I looked at that form, it says, it calls it land value, improvements value, and then new construction value. So I don't know if for instance, if somebody wanted to look this up, they would look at this and see improvements value is what we are basing our calculation on, which is a fair market value or market value as you total it up. So can we somehow, indicate the improvement value, market value, something like that, so when people look at their own documentation, they know what we're looking at? Jordan?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. And is that something we want to include in the definition section? And is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, because I know when I talked to Mr. Scannell about this before it passed, I was confused as to what market value, assessment value, and the thing that I know that I tripped up on the very first time I read this months ago was improvements means not what we're talking about improvements for the 353 necessarily. My house on my land is already an improvement on my parcel. So that was a little confusing. So I think if we just maybe clean that up just a little bit on the language, that'd be great. Any other questions on the list that Paul provided?
If I could just again ask, in past redevelopment structures, has it been questioned by homeowners, this deeding back and forth of the property? Any concerns ever raised about that process in prior development plans?
I'm going to defer to Tom on that. I don't know of any, but maybe Tom does.
There haven't been any. Once staff goes over the documents with the potential applicants. They understand that. There is a little bit kind of like what the board had with the confusion, but once staff explains the process and how it's more streamlined with Jackson County, they have no issues with it. The property owner still maintains the ownership of that property, and what gets recorded just reflects that they are in fact receiving tax abatement.
If a homeowner was interested in learning more about that, is there someplace on the city website or something that they could see the process in black and white? A written procedure, is there?
And that's something that we can create as part of this. And I believe, I was trying to see if it was on the agenda.
It's
I
not.
didn't see it.
But
It
that's
is
definitely,
on the agenda under the guidelines review, where they have to attend a meeting, or training session to understand the process and that type of thing. So I think that once we get to that piece, we can clarify that that's something we want to make sure that they understand.
Okay.
Would you agree with that, Jordan, Tom?
yeah. And I will say to Tom's point, it's staff's intention, once we have these documents laid out, that we will create a home for them on the city's website, that we can include information, spelling out a little more clearly the process, here are the 5 steps, kind of thing. So yeah, that's definitely part of what we're gonna work on.
Okay. I had one last question as I look down on number 7, talking about labor costs. I went out and looked at the Missouri Department of Labor prevailing wages document for Jackson County, because you had indicated the Davis-Bacon wage requirements. So I understand, say for instance, I do my own electrical work, which would be need to call the fire department probably more than anything because I mess it up. But if I did it on my own, it would be, recorded as, I'm going to make up a number, $46.85 an hour for purposes of evaluation and towards to what we need. I do have a question. If I hire my neighbor to do some work, and I'm actually, asking on residential here, not commercial, which may be a different answer. I presume I do not have to pay prevailing wages, or I should presume I do.
No, you don't. In that case, you wouldn't, but you would need a licensed contractor to do that work. And then whatever they quote you is how we would calculate that fee.
Okay. Because I was looking at
That's
a very expensive roof coming down the pike.
Yeah. And that's just, for our purposes, we needed some way to calculate those costs, to factor those in there. And, prevailing wage and Davis-Bacon, I think, are just, the accepted ways for us to get to those costs.
Okay.
Well,
very good.
And in that scenario you mentioned, the permits need to be pulled for this work as well.
Yes.
Which would then cause for inspections by various code departments. And I believe city code requires us, if you're putting a light bulb in, that you need a licensed contractor now. So that's just an aside there, sorry.
Not quite that bad, Greg, but okay.
Well, you didn't write the code. You didn't vote on the code either, but anyway, sorry.
But all those points are
Clarifications we
correct.
may have to have.
Yeah. But that is
Okay,
correct.
very
Any
good.
of this work would have to be done by a licensed contractor. If it wasn't you doing the work yourself, and yeah, whatever they charge is how we would calculate that. And then obviously that work would have to be inspected.
I have a
Any other
question just
questions
for
on-
clarity.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Crystal.
I just wanted clarity. So it's based on what a quote would be from a licensed contractor. Because say I'm going to do the sheetrock myself and I am doing it from a YouTube video. So it would take a licensed contractor maybe a day. It takes me 3 weeks. So the cost is based off of what it would take a licensed contractor to do, or is it actually based off of the work that you have actually done?
That's gonna be a question for Tom. I'm assuming it's, you have to kind of strike a balance there.
So if I understand your question correctly, if you are doing a remodel of your kitchen and you have a contractor who's coming out to do that work, but you want to save a little cost and put some sweat equity into the project, in talking to Pat Robinson, who is the tax abatement person who's handled the prior tax abatement programs, they divide out those different functions. So if you have that licensed contractor and he has a quote for the work that he's going to do, but you're putting sweat equity into that, you can use the Davis-Bacon hourly rate for those different components. If it's hanging drywall, if it's doing electrical, if it's doing plumbing, it's based on those different Davis-Bacon rates.
Okay. It sounds like that's something as we get more into when we get someone who's applied, then we'll have to, maybe that's a learn as we go, you know, with some of those. Would sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on Paul's questions? Okay, hearing none, we will move to discussion and approval of the guidelines. I have several questions, and I'm wondering if everyone would agree if we took it kind of page by page, just to see who has questions on what. So I am looking at page 1, which is the Southwest Independence Redevelopment Court tax abatement and program guidelines for parcel specific properties. On this page for myself, I have no questions. Does anyone else have questions on page 1? Hearing none. Page 2. I have a question on section 3 under eligible property. Let's get to, are you going to share your screen there, Jordan? Or
Yeah, hold on. I may have lost it. Give me a second.
Okay. Well, if everyone else is looking at theirs or has a copy, I'll go ahead and phrase my question. In the second half of paragraph 1 of section 3, it says, proposed residential projects on parcels valued less than or equal to the average home value in Independence will be deemed automatically eligible for parcel-specific tax abatement, assuming the project meets these guidelines and is approved by staff. So if someone says, as one of the requirements, I have to fix my driveway, I have to repay my driveway, and we're like, okay, your property value before is less than this average, then an inspector comes out from the city and says, yep, that's what you should do, and that's fine. That will then not come to us for approval. Is that correct?
No, those would still come to you. And this may be a place where language just needs to be cleaned up a little bit. But our intention with this is really just that there's no additional review on your part as far as scrutinizing that work. It would still have to come to you for approval. It just wouldn't, because the language we have in here for those commercial projects, but remember we talked last time about the additional approval, which is a little unclear and we don't really know what that means. That's just sort of the other side of this, where those projects are deemed eligible. They still have to come to you and get the stamp of approval.
Okay. So yeah, maybe we need something in there where it says will be deemed automatically eligible, but still has to be approved by. Okay.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I missed what section and what page you were just discussing.
Page 2 has numbered section 3, eligible property.
Okay.
The second half of that first paragraph.
Okay.
Got it?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on section 3? Moving on to section 4. I have a question. When I compare under tier 1, that last sentence, the market value of the land is not affected by the freeze. I'm wondering if we could please make that consistent with the program guidelines, which goes on to say, and taxes on the land or whatever. That sentence doesn't end after the word freeze in the guidelines. Or I'm sorry,
Okay.
on the plan. So I'll just make a note, and I can mark these up for you, Jordan. If you and I want to go through them, I'll mark them up, and
Okay, yeah, I'll make some notes.
okay with that.
I'm sure I'll miss something.
Very basic, I like A and B to be the same. I'll finish with my questions on this page, and then please I'll ask for any others. Then under example, under tier 1 at the end, it says comma or semicolon. I think that should just be a period. Is that correct? Because there's no or.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And then the last one on that page under tier 2, again, that last sentence to make that consistent with the other. So does anybody have any other questions on that page?
I didn't hear your last one, Laura.
Under tier 2, the last sentence, I would just like it to mirror the change that we discussed under tier 1 and
Okay.
probably on tier 3 too. Yeah, I believe.
Okay.
Anything else specific on that page? Moving on to the next page, under tier 3, excuse me, the sentence is added in there. Any construction or reconstruction must adhere to all pertinent city codes. Could we either add that to all the sections, because I presume it does apply to all the tiers, or can we just make that a blatant comment, obvious statement somewhere that it does? Does that make sense?
That can be added to all of these.
Okay, very good. Again, a simple just wording thing. In the example for tier 3, it says at the end, improvements include construction or reconstruction of an appropriate structure resulting in added taxable parcels. I'm not sure what taxable parcels means. Is that like an outbuilding? Is that new parcel?
Appropriate structure result.
No, yeah.
Huh.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything on that.
No, I think we're just kind of trying to remember.
Yeah.
I think that's probably maybe just addable taxable value, I think is maybe more of the wording that we're probably looking for.
Okay. I'll mark it as something that I'll make a note on that we can discuss to finish up. I just didn't know what adding more parcels meant. And then the very last paragraph there, all abatement incentives exclude land market value, which instead of saying remain taxable is not affected by this program. Again, just for consistency. So nothing substantive. Again, they're just finishing that phrase out like we do on the other sentences, paragraphs. That's all I have on page 3. Anyone else have anything on page 3? If not, moving on to page 4. And I apologize if I have a lot of
Jordan,
questions.
with that demolition and reconstruction, would that be maybe referring to buying 2 lots and combining into one property?
Specifically the question about taxable parcels.
Yeah.
It could be. I'd have to go back and look and see if I have any notes. I mean, I know, this is basically saying, if you bought a dilapidated home, tore it down and rebuilt it, but that doesn't necessarily add a taxable parcel. So it probably just, sloppy language, sloppy writing on our part. So,
okay.
It could have been, Jordan, where some lots in the southwest tax payment area are double lots, and maybe it was splitting the lot to create an additional tax parcel, and they built a house. We'd have to go back and look at our notes.
Okay, very good. On to page 4, the residential guidelines for required improvements. Some of this, as I've gone through and finished reading, maybe some of my questions have been answered, so I'll try to take them off my list here if they have. Say, under, obviously we're going to go, we have A, B, C, D, E that are required items. So if I want to do like A, I need to make structural repair and correction to my house. But I'm not going to be able to afford to go on and do a driveway right now and a roof or, and these other things under requirements. Would I just apply? Is it best to just apply for what I can do within a year? Now, I do notice in the later where you can get a variance that says you didn't make it in a year, so we can extend it by 1 year. But if I do that, and I say, okay, I want to do A. I want to fix my foundation, and I apply for that, and then I want to do fix my driveway. Then I apply separately for that because of timing. Or do I say, because clearly I don't want to commit to 3 or 4 things that are required that maybe I know I can't afford to do in 1 year. Does that make sense?
My question, Laura, are you speaking of you make both requests at the same time of the application, or are you saying you make the application for the structural repair and then a week or 2 or a month later decide you're going to do the driveway? I'm not sure which scenario you're speaking of.
I guess I'm asking the difference between the two of what you're saying. So say I know for sure I can afford to fix my structural repair issues, and I apply for that. We go through all the machinations, and I start that process. Then say 6 months later, I'm like, oh, I realize now I can afford to do my driveway. So now I have to apply again for my driveway, have it approved, inspected, go through all the machinations, and then the start for that, the 1 year start date for that is say 6 months later. But maybe if you can afford to do a structural and driveway, you apply for it both, and I can get all of that done in a year, and I can afford that. So I'm really asking.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jordan.
I think traditionally we've done those as one single application. And I think what we would suggest in a case like this, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically you wait to make the application until maybe you've either saved up enough for all the projects you want to do, or you maintain the record of the structural work that you've done, and then 6 months later when you come back and decide you now have the money for the driveway, you could turn both of those in as a total project. One's completed and maybe one's coming up, and we say, okay, this qualifies you for tier 2 perhaps, because that's going to be the key with this. Because of the tiers, right. you can't really initiate tax abatement on a first project unless, of course, that first project gets you somewhere, and then you're very far from the next tier. So Tom, is that kind of your understanding of how we'd probably work this program?
Correct. And the section that we are on now is those are the minimums that they have to do. So when a property owner contacts the city about, hey, I want to maybe participate in this tax abatement program, city and the property owner go through all of these A through E, I think you said, Laura, and those are all the that's the initial inspection that the city is doing. So they will look to make sure that there's no blighting influence on or associated with this property. So if they have a driveway that's crumbling and needs to be repaired, but everything else, the foundation is good, their landscaping's kept up, their sidewalks in good shape, the only blighting influence is their driveway. But they wanted to put a kitchen in, staff would tell them, in order for you to get tax abatement, you have to fix your driveway, and you can also do and get tax abatement for your kitchen remodel. So these are just the criteria in which city inspectors are basing that initial inspection of the property on to see what exterior improvements they have to do in order to qualify for tax abatement.
Okay, so for instance, if they came out and said, Laura, you have a problem with your foundation, this has to be fixed because it's dangerous, not up to code, you know, whatever type thing, and you have to fix this driveway to get obviously to the next section where you can do the fun things like the bathrooms and the painting and the interior work. But I can only afford to do one of them. So I can only afford to do the structural repair. Are we saying that if I can only do that and I do that and it comes up over the 10% or 25% or whatever, the, you know, 10 or 25%, I guess, of your numbers, but I can't get to driveways because I can't afford to fix my driveway, then I would get no abatement, or I would get the abatement for the structural. And that's just where I stop, because until I can fix B, which is my driveway, you can't do anything more.
Yeah, the way it's been handled in the past and how I would envision this being handled is it's all of those things need to be addressed up front. We have seen where the board in these other tax abatement areas have granted extensions on that, where the applicant comes in and says, I'm going to take care of my foundation. I'm also going to take care of my driveway. My foundation is going to be taken care of in 6 months, but my driveway, it's going to take me about two years. And those properties, those other redevelopment boards have worked with those applicants and have granted that. And that is where it's on, the duty falls on staff in administering this to keep track of those deadlines. And when they miss those deadlines, then they bring this application back before the redevelopment board and say, hey, the property owner of 111 East Maple didn't fix their driveway like he said. Do we revoke their tax abatement? And then the board has that decision. That's how it's been handled in the past. It's worked fairly well. Kind of that give and take.
Okay. Paul, you had a question?
It almost seems like we're penalizing the homeowners in this situation. We don't say anything about the driveway or the sidewalk or anything, but now I want to do some needed repairs to my house. And says, by the way, it says, you can't do that, or you can't get any incentive here until you fix this. And it just seems like, because when you also look at the planned area and the homes that are involved here, those are pretty expensive projects. Replacing a foundation, you may be looking at $20,000 or more. Sidewalk, you've replaced your driveway, you're probably looking at anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 or more, just depending on what kind you put in. But putting that requirement on the homeowner, yes, I'd like to have it done, but it just seems like we're kind of penalizing them, and it kind of, now you're putting a homeowner in a position where now I've got to choose or so you won't let me do my foundation until I do this. Well, I'm just going ahead and do this, and the heck with the city.
So I think this easy response.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think what the city would say is that the issues or the items that are on here as required projects up front are the blighting issues for the neighborhood and should be addressed up front. The other ones are nice to haves. And yes, maybe my kitchen is from the 1940s, but it's not affecting other people's property values or the neighborhood's property values. These issues are crumbling sidewalks and structural issues on the homes and those kind of things. So this was, I remember, a point of contention or a point of discussion at the EDIC meeting, with the other taxing jurisdictions. So
there was a lot of discussion with the other taxing jurisdictions in regards to this topic, that they wanted to address blight.
By the way, this is one of the questions that came up earlier, which I thought the answer was interesting. I have been under the impression, not necessarily for independence, but general impression that sidewalks were the responsibility of the city. And in the response, it came back that no, the homeowners are responsible for the maintenance and repairs of the sidewalk. So that was just interesting. So that fits in with this discussion as well.
May I ask a question? I'm looking at this language. The project for all residential, is everyone with me? It's at the bottom.
Can you give us a section, please?
Right before section A, structural repair.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The project for all residential rehabilitation, reconstruction, and/or new construction receiving parcel-specific tax abatement must comply with the following, if deemed applicable, following the independent inspection. If I'm understanding the discussion, are you interpreting that to say that before one could do one particular exterior repair, if one of these also needed repair, it would have to be done first? Because I didn't read it as that. I read it as though we're saying, or we're trying to differentiate for the homeowner, these are the types of repairs that, with everything else being equal, could qualify for tax abatement, as opposed to inside or interior repairs to the kitchen, the hallway, or the bathroom. Is that not how it works? I mean, we're not saying this is mandatory. I thought what we're saying is this, all other things being equal, are the types of repairs that are eligible. Does that
My
make
understanding, yeah, your question makes sense, and I want to phrase where I see it so that Jordan and Tom can clear it up for us. My understanding, because this section starts with required improvement and says, the project, like you said there, must comply with the following. First of all, we need to talk about independent inspection, but I don't know if that's city inspection or independent, but so basically I think of it as a checklist, A, B, C, D, and E. And so someone comes out to inspect your house and says structural, yes or no, needs fixed, blight, driveway, sidewalks, landscape, yes or no, smoke detectors, yes or no, architectural, D, yes or no, electrical service, yes or no. And if all those are not answered yes, you don't get this is one part I want to clear up. If you don't pass and you get a check yes on all of those, you don't get an abatement. If you only do one of those things, even if it is more than 10%, you don't get an abatement because you have not finished checklist A, B, C, D, E. That's my first question. So does that part of it make sense? Like, you can't ask us for an abatement on anything else until you have a yes on, or a no, you're done on A through E.
Or that your project will address any of those no's.
Right, it can address any of those, not all of them.
But all of them that exist, I guess, is our intention. Any of these items, if you have structural issues and crumbling sidewalks and driveways, all of those issues would need to be addressed as part of the project to be eligible.
One more time, if there's a structural repair needed and a driveway repair needed, you are saying that as the homeowner, I would have to complete both of those.
I suppose, and this might be a question for the board, if the structural issue qualified, that might, I don't know, Tom, what your thoughts are on this, but
that's what I thought. I thought if I do one of the tiers, I'm good. If I'm doing my driveway and I fit within the valuation of one of the tiers, that's an eligible.
Yeah, Tom, you have thoughts on that? I can't remember what our initial discussions were on that.
Yeah, so at the Economic Development and Incentive Commission, there was a lot of discussion regarding this, and they wanted the blighting influences addressed in order for tax abatement to be given. So if the blighting influence are 3 of the items on the list, but everything else is fine, they have to address those 3 items in order to get tax abatement.
Okay.
Now the board can work with the applicant as they see fit. If an applicant comes forward and says, I can do 1 and 2, but I will get 3 done in a year, and the board sees fit, the board can decide to grant them that tax abatement. If the board does do that, then staff will be watching that property to make sure that when that deadline hits, that they have that 3rd item completed, or else they bring that application back before the board to revoke the tax abatement.
Then I would
Okay, so
recommend we need to reword that paragraph, because I don't know how anyone else interpreted it, but I'm not quite sure it says what you just
Okay.
said.
I would agree, and I think this goes back to Paul's comment. Let's say I can afford to do my driveway, and if I fix my driveway, that will help eliminate some blight. But I can't fix the sidewalk because I don't have the money to fix the sidewalk. And I'd like to help, but I can't afford to do that. So I do my driveway, and it, for whatever reason, however, it comes up to 10% more than the value of my house, which is, you have to get above 10%. And it gets above 10% or whatever, and I do it, then I think I should get an abatement for that improvement. Because I think that part of the issue with this entire concept, which is what I brought up with members of the EIC before they discussed it, is people have to be able to have the money to afford to do these things to get an abatement. If you don't have some people don't have money to pay for these, all these things. Like I looked at it and I'm like, okay, if I got to fix the driveway and the roof and the structure and the this and the that, and I have to do that all within a year, or maybe I get a year's extension, and I'm going to pay, and they reassess my values. They won't do it this year, but when they reassess next year, they're like, oh, she put in a new driveway, but I can't get an abatement on that because I haven't fixed my foundation, or I haven't fixed my broken windows, or, what other things are required. I think that part of the issue of things with blight come from people in the area who don't have the money to just do all those things. So I hate to leave anybody out who's willing to do any one of these things if it comes up above the 10%.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Because the area we're looking at, I would highly suspect, I think I read somewhere that the average salary is, I don't know, 42 grand or something. When you consider other living expenses, when you consider what we're going through right now with employment versus unemployment due to the pandemic, if indeed the goal or mission is to reduce and or eliminate blight, I think we're gonna have to meet homeowners a little bit more, where they are and where they are economically in this neck of the woods.
Any other discussion on that?
Yeah, I do agree. Yeah.
I agree. The way it sounds now, it's targeted toward people who have a lot of rental properties, to be honest, is what it sounds like.
Yes. And I think, when I specifically look at my own financial situation, my own house, and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to get that until I do all these. I may need 3 of these, but I may not ever be able to afford, or, and even in the time of this whole thing runs, that I may never be able to afford to do all of those things. So I think that I would like us to focus on the wording being, I understand the EIC's the EIC's thoughts on reducing the blight, which is fine, in that you have to have these 5 checked off before you can go get something like a new garage or, you know, add on to your house or something. But you don't have to have all 5 of these completed to get an abatement. If you do any one of these, you should get abated for that portion. Then again, like next time, and then, maybe in a couple of years, I can afford my driveway. So now I come back and I do my driveway. I see the administrative nightmare of all that too. And I see where the process comes that every other year, Jackson County, depending on how the assessor's department's working, can come back and assess your property. If I can't get all 5 of these done, and I have to get all 5 done before I can get an abatement, in the meantime, that could be a couple of assessments that they've already come out and assessed my value for, that is where I thought I was going to get an abatement. Does that make sense to anyone else?
I agree.
Tom, your thoughts, Jordan, since you were with the
I'll
EIC,
just say, I thought that was a very good discussion.
Let us take a look at this. What we have to do, we have to balance what the EDIC and the council looked at in the redevelopment plan. Make sure that we are still meeting those requirements, but also let's go back and talk to our tax abatement administrator, who's been doing this for over 15 years. She's seen all types of situations, income levels, everything like that. And we still have to meet the what the council and the EDIC had recommended. So let us take a deep dive into this and come back with some different thoughts and ideas.
Okay. I think that's good.
Can I address a couple things?
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
First of all, there's a section in here where section 7, tax abatement is not intended for conversion to additional rental unit, and it does limit the abatement that's eligible for someone who owns more than 5 units in a 2-block area. That's maybe a little bit, liberal in terms of the number. But anyway, there are protections against this just fixing up rental homes. And actually, it is meant to encourage turning homes that are rental into owner-occupied homes by making them such value that someone would want to turn it over. Secondly, the discussion of the incentive committee is that the taxing districts don't feel like it's their responsibility to fund the addition of HVAC for someone or to remodel the master suite. Now, while that may increase the value of the home, it does not do anything for the aesthetics of the neighborhood, which is something that is more of a global meaning neighborhood issue than it is, potential to any one particular home. And secondly, or thirdly, I guess, that, this encourages, at some level, what this encourages is not necessarily for current homeowners. And it will benefit current homeowners who can have the ability to go out and do these things, or go out and borrow money, or whatever they do. But frankly, it encourages people who say that they want to get into a home and get into it at a lower value and then put in work, and all of a sudden they realize the value of improving a home by decreasing what the tax level is and putting in that kind of work and getting something at a lower value. I mean, I bought my house as a foreclosure. I've built, I specifically bought it that way. It's made more, it's worth more now because I took that risk. And that's what we're looking at, it's people that come in and inject capital, if you will, into these neighborhoods.
And I would say to that point, as being someone who lives in the neighborhood now, I'm not looking to buy another property, like to fix up or something. I'm looking at the property that I live and own right now. That I guess I wasn't under the impression that that's what this program was more to encourage outside investment. I understand the concept of the blight, but I also believe that part of this is an incentive to bring up values, of property so that improves the overall value of the city and that type of thing in our little square on the southwest side. This was literally one of the very first things when I was talking to Laurie Wiley about it. She's on that committee, and I said, well, a lot of us, I'll say us, I don't know, that live in the area, we may not have the money to do this, and if I'm going to end up saving, if this is the market value, then you take it times your 19% to get your, assessed value, and then your tax rate is this, and I'm saving, I don't, maybe I'm being completely outlined, I'm saving $200 a year. Well, in the end, this is a lot of work to get to. I mean, $200 is $200, but I had to have 10% of the value of my house to put into it before I could start saving $200 a year. And your your owners, like I said, if they had this is what I said in the beginning when I talked to her about it, is if they had the money to do these things, I think they would go ahead and do them without this small incentive. So I don't want us to. I understand. I think would like to see what we have to propose, and I definitely want to move our meeting forward just as responsible for time, but that we look at this and say, yes, you may not be able to ever get past these A through E requirements, but you don't have to do them all to get an abatement, because we would love it if you would just replace your driveway, because that would be great, So could we do that?
And I can agree with that, but I don't see that we can get into flooring, tiling, and carpeting as being something I can give an abatement for if the outside of your house is still contributing to blight.
Well, I think
that would be what every taxing district would say. I feel confident in that. Having sat in the room, that no one wants to foot the bill for flooring, tiling, and carpeting when a house doesn't have good curb appeal.
Well, couldn't we differentiate between those two types of repairs?
Yeah, and I want to go ahead and what I'd like to go ahead and do, just for the sake of time, if nothing else, I think we understand the concerns here. I think I understand the concept of you have to get through A through E before you can go tile your bathroom or redecorate or whatever you want to say to your master bedroom or something. I think there's a general agreement on that, but let's just go ahead. Can we table that for now to let Jordan and Tom and whoever would like to, one or two of us that can have me to discuss that with you guys and with the person who's administered these things for the last 15 years. Would it be all right if we kind of tabled that as we move along? Okay, hearing no objection, I'm going to go ahead on to the next page to throw out a couple of other things quickly. We are in section, I'm looking at subsection A, 4 and 5. What I'm going to do is I look down my page here these questions that I have are very simple and more to wording than the overall concepts that we're kind of focusing on. So I think if everybody's okay with that page and doesn't have any major structural questions, can we go ahead and move to the next page? Just a head nod, would that be all right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then again, my comments on page 6, which would be right before the, at E there, electrical service, nothing there of substantive issues I have. I'm going to go ahead and turn the page unless someone stops me. Same for page 7. One general question I had as I got to the commercial and multifamily required improvements, I'm moving to the commercial side now. When we say the residential has to meet city codes, but then in the commercial side, it says it has to meet UDO. Jordan or Tom, can you explain to me what the difference is? I kind of thought they were the same thing, and clearly I don't know.
Yeah, the Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO, is part of City Code. It's chapter 14.
Right.
And it's really just the planning and zoning section. Basically, it'll just require certain, setbacks and parking requirements and, any of those other planning issues. Maybe technically we should probably, Tom, include that in the residential section as well, because there are provisions of the UDO that, address residential property as well.
For setbacks and yeah.
Or we just say city codes and then that covers it because UDO is under city codes or something. I was just a little questioning on that, but it's not, again, to the substantive section of anything. Okay, anyone else have any big substantive questions on this document before I look at our next agenda item and see where we are and see how we want to handle the rest of the meeting? And the only other thing we would have would be page 11, where we talk about fees, which is another agenda item. Anything else that anyone has of the big substantive nature of this document?
I'd like to, in one of my questions, I asked about deeding the property over to the city, and then it gets deeded back. And then someone pointed out that Jackson County has streamlined this, so it's not necessary. Could we take that section out then?
Yep, we certainly can.
Because it would just be confusing.
Yep, we'll definitely take that out.
As long as there isn't any concern from a legal perspective. And the reason I asked that because I did some research and I can handle this just because I've set up businesses before, but we are going to need to do a filing with the Secretary of State's office to file as a for-profit corporation. And so there's some things that I'm going to need to understand, maybe from Charlie Shields or someone else who's, done this kind of before on the accounting side, how these things are accounted for. If they're deeded over to us, that's not, what does that constitute? Are there any issues on accounting that need to be there? Or is there anything that if I wanted to go sell my house, I need to know that there was this deed thing that changed that I need to be aware of? I just want to make sure if we need to cover it because of that we keep the language, but if not, we add what you're saying. It's a...
Well, we may modify it to make it more clear, that we will follow Jackson County's process, if nothing else.
Okay. Paul, did you have something else?
I was just going to say your next agenda item is the fee schedule, and that's on page 11, Roman numeral 11A. So, however you want to approach that.
Let's, if we don't mind on the agenda, let's move to 5A, which is the window for accepting work already complete. If we can do that one real quick, because that does also apply to one of these pages, because I noticed, Jordan, on page 4, which is the section that is the residential required improvements, 4th paragraph down.
Right, we went with January 2018.
It says 18, and I think that should be 19. Is that correct from our previous discussion?
Yeah, if that's the consensus, that's what we want to do. Yeah, that's what we talked about initially.
Okay, it's on page 4 of of the guidelines that we're looking at. So that's where the section is noted that I think if we want to do what we had discussed, that should be a 19 instead of 18. So is there any other thought on changing it from basically 20 back to 19? I'm okay with that if that has been done in the past and was acceptable. I'm a little hesitant because I don't know, maybe it's the accountant in me that says until we establish this was not passed until, December of 2019, that you don't go back and consider things that happened before this was approved by the city. I feel a little funny in that, it just seems a little hinky to me in terms of the way I normally would run a business per se. But if Tom and Jordan are, if you're giving us the indication that that's good, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, that, as we said, that was, practice in the past. If you guys decided you wanted to go back until just, January 1st of this year, that would be fine too. I know we have had some interest of people saying, oh, well, I just did a project in calendar year 2019. But so it really is a decision for you guys. But yeah, traditionally, that's what we've gone back 1 year. So.
Any other input from the committee? Greg?
I'm fine going back to January 1 of 19. I mean, this process has gone a lot slower than, anyone thought it would have. Maybe typically you wouldn't go back that far, but given the fact that it's been under consideration for so long, I think we should.
Okay. I'm going to take a quick vote on that unless there's any other discussion.
And I'll make that motion. I'll make that motion to use January 1 of 2019.
Okay. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay. Just a little further discussion. I want to make sure as we look at that we make sure that if we're going back to do that, say for instance, it said, you have to have pictures of before and after. So I'm not sure if I might have replaced something that I don't have a picture of it. I can't tell you what it looked like before, but I think we have to take those each on an individual basis as they come up. I would imagine we can't write something for every possible scenario. Any further discussion? If not, Jordan, we call the roll on the motion to accept bids or applications, back to projects from January 1 of 2019.
Yeah. Callahan?
Paul, yes.
Dominic?
Yes.
Bingy?
Yes.
Graves?
Yes.
Kiger?
Yes.
Luganbeal?
Yes.
And Stout?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Next item is the application fees. Before I ask for discussion on this, I want to note that we are already about 15 minutes behind our scheduled time. Would we like to have discussion on this now, or should we table this for another meeting, potentially in a week? Discussion?
I think we can get it done quickly.
Disagree with
Okay.
it.
Okay, let's move on to the discussion then. So we're on page 11 of the guidelines. I had, so as I look at these, the application fee of $25, part of me wants to say that I hope that we would make this as easy as possible for homeowners. Although, because the city is going to invest time and we are going to invest volunteer time in this, to keep out anyone who's, although I don't know, I don't see anybody applying for this if they're just trying to do it willy-nilly, because I think it's a pretty intense process. So any discussion just on the residential application? 25. No discussion? Okay. Any discussion on the commercial application fee? And I presume this applies if I owned one rental property, I'm considered commercial, correct? Because I'm renting that out as a business, correct?
I don't know, Tom.
Multifamily is considered commercial. Multifamily, which consists of 3 units or more. So a single family and a duplex is considered residential. And 3 or more units and anything non-residential is considered commercial.
Okay, so if I own my own home, that's clearly it's residential. I own the house next door and I rent it out. That is also falls under residential or commercial.
Correct.
That's the only one I have.
Residential.
Yeah. Laura, if you owned 20 single family homes as a landlord, each one of those is still considered residential.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so any discussion on commercial application fee, which would be multifamily housing or something other than housing, which I don't think is covered here. Any discussion on the $100? Okay, hearing none. The initial inspection fee of $250. This kind of comes back to one of my questions where it talked about the initial independent inspection. And I heard Tom or Jordan, one of you said that we discussed the city doing that initial inspection. Are we talking about paying, if it's the city that does it, are we talking about paying the city for that? Or are we talking about paying outside inspectors to do this?
No, for the other programs, there is an outside independent inspector who does not work for the city, and in order to compensate her time for going out and, walking through the property with the property owner, doing the assessment, that's what that fee, the phrase that costs. And then if there's a need for, I believe this covers like one reinspection, they have to go back out a second time. So yes, she's not a city employee. I guess that's assuming that we use the same inspector who's familiar with the program and has worked in the other areas, but no, so it is an outside person.
Okay, and you said there is someone who is not employed by the city who normally does this. If I decided I did not want to choose that person, I could choose someone else who also qualifies to do this, or what are those requirements to be somebody who can do that?
That's a Tom question. I'm not sure how we would handle that.
We'd have to go and look and see how the other tax payment areas, how that is structured. Because from my understanding, it is just that one outside inspector that performs that, and it's not the property owner going out and finding their own inspector to do that inspection. So let us go back and talk to and vet that out some more.
Okay. Because I have a couple questions there too, I guess. So if I like the residential fee, if I have 5 homes, I have to write 5 separate applications. So that's 5 different fees, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then I have to have all 5 of those inspected. Then I have to pay 5 times $250 because that person's time is going to be $250 for one parcel, next parcel $250, $250, $250, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So I would like us to add something in there that this is per parcel or per application or something to indicate that. I think that's probably obvious, but I guess it comes to my mind as a question. So just to summarize, if I were wanting to just take care of my own personal property, I would have to come up front with $275 if we pass this to get my application, like even to get it written up and then to submit it, correct? Is that the way everyone else reads it? Okay. I see that for people who own homes in my neighborhood, that might be, I don't know how I want to say it, if it's a lot of money, but if you're planning to invest 10% of the value of your home, maybe you're okay with $275, and that's not a tough charge. and obviously if the lady who's doing it charges or whoever that inspector is charges $250 because that's just what we have to pay. Clearly that money has to be paid from someone. The city's not going to pay that. And we're not going to go out and raise money somewhere else to pay for it. Right. So I'm kind of thinking we don't have a choice on the commercial or on the initial inspection fee of $250. Is that correct? There's really not a question. Like, we have to pay somebody to do that, and it's not going to be
Right.
our corporation or the city. Yes. Tom, yes.
Yes.
Oops.
Okay.
I was muted. I mean,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, yes, we have to do that one because somebody's got to do that, and that's what that fee is. Okay. Okay. And I think the 3-year compliance inspection fee is of $50 probably is, not as, obviously not as much as the initial fee of $250. So is there any discussion on either any individual line item there or the grouping in total that you would like to discuss? Okay, hearing none, I will, can I get a motion to accept the fee rate as delineated on page 11, section 11A of the guidelines?
A motion.
Second, can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, and in the saving of time, instead of calling the roll, is there anyone who would vote no for this? Hearing none, motion passes. The fees are as delineated. Okay. Couple of quick items that I had made note of. I was wondering if we would consider having, and I can set this up, a Dropbox account or some such place where we can have documents put together that the board can have access to at any time, just to keep things kind of somewhere tight. Is that okay with everyone? Hearing up, no, I'm sorry.
Good idea.
Okay, I'll set that up. I would also ask if anyone who, I would like to be able to have people's phone numbers in case there's a question, or if we want to talk, individually amongst each other, but I don't want anybody forced to have to share their phone number if they don't want to. So could we each individually let Jordan know, if only for the group, not for the general public, that we would have phone numbers to share with each other? If you could do that by, next Tuesday, just let him know whether you'd be in or out on that. If you're out, that's fine. That's totally understandable. We'll stick to email. And I also, of course, want to just make sure we always, if we do anything in email, that we're not having a discussion, because we have a quorum, which would cause us to need an open meeting. So questions are great that we can put on a list, but, just making sure we don't do the back and forth talking that would get us into any kind of trouble. Then as far as the next meeting date, I was wondering if you guys would be interested in setting up a standard meeting time, or right now in the early stages, if we need to maybe go a little more frequently than we will once we're settled, because I think the next big item that we need to consider for our next agenda is how we're going to get this out to people so they know how to do this once we get these particulars in order. So any thought on, should we need to meet next week versus, and it's a holiday short week, so maybe the next week to meet in 2 weeks and then discuss recurring meetings after we feel like we're a little more settled? Would that be okay?
That's fine with me.
Okay. Can we, if you have your calendar, can we look at the calendar quick to see if we can decide on a meeting time? Jordan, why don't you holler out what you have available for the week of, what is that? The week of the 14th. Obviously the 14th is out because of council meeting.
Yeah.
I'm available Thursday the 17th. How's that, Jordan, for you?
As luck would have it, we need to use this go-to meeting at 6:30 for a Board of Adjustment meeting. So if we could commit to meeting at 5 and being done before 6:30, we could use it.
On the 17th, you're saying?
On the on Thursday, the 17th.
Okay, John, how about you on the 17th at 5?
Yeah, 5 should be fine.
Okay, Crystal, thumbs up or down?
I actually have a commitment, so I cannot do that 17th.
Okay, let's go around and see if we're, because I think we're probably going to have to hit as many people as we can. Lance, how about you, 17th at 5? Thumbs up. Greg? Thumbs up. Paul?
Yes.
Thumbs up. Karen, thumbs up. Okay, let's go ahead and schedule for Thursday, September 17th at 5 p.m. And Paul, if you will type up the minutes before the next meeting, and then
They're done.
You're good. You're good. All right. Very good. So we'll see each other on the 17th. I will do some other things like getting these bylaws put together and some other things that we need to do before the next meeting. And I'll schedule time to meet with Tom and George to talk about some of the other items that are on here. If there isn't any further discussion, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Or I will motion to adjourn. Second, and all in favor, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Very good. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.